Thank you for staying with us. It's still TVC Breakfast, and now to another discussion which promises to be insightful as well. And that is us panning our attention again to the power sector, this time through the eyes of governors of the South-South region that have now joined in the calls for improved power sector and reforms generally. Well, as the power sector continues to grapple with various challenges and Nigerians lamenting over poor electricity in the country, governors of the South states under the auspices of the Braced Commission, and Braced means Bayelsa Rivers, Akwa Ibom, Cross River, Edo, and Delta states. Well, they have now come together to form this commission called Braced. On Tuesday, speaking in one voice in Yenagoa, the Bayelsa state capital, governors of the 6 states and representatives and their representatives called on the federal government to embark on a comprehensive review of the power sector with particular reference to the transmission arm of the sector. Well, the Southern governors also lamented the persistent poor state of electricity in the region, calling for the power companies operating in that region to work more closely with the governments, the state governments, that is, this to ensure that the new Electricity Act of 2023 is fully implemented. And joining us now from our Abuja studio to talk about this is strategist, policy analyst, and group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf. Thanks for joining us again on TVC Breakfast. So what do you make of, this move by the South-South governors amidst the challenges in the power sector? Now they are calling for particular attention to be placed on the transmission arm.
Thank you for having me, Kemi and Theophilus. Well, it's a welcome development that, first of all, I commend the South-South governors for coming together to form, a forum where they can push a common agenda for the betterment of the people of the South-South. We hope that will remain so and consistently so. That being said, also the call for concerted effort is an added group of voices, if you like, to the teeming Nigerians that are really, speaking to this issue of power, which has remained, a mirage for Nigeria. Indeed, unless we deal with our power issue, infrastructure issue, the dream of coming out of the present socio-economic doldrum will be a dream, talk less of, making progress going forward. But I would like to speak to the South-South governors on this matter. You mentioned something, Kemi, the new act, the new provision within the Act 2023 with regards to power actually empowers states to generate their own power. So what I was expecting actually is for governors to go back and come up with various strategies on how to harness the various options they have in their states to generate power while they are speaking to the federal government to deal with the transmission, distribution, generation, transmission, and distribution issue. Because indeed that is an opportunity for a quick win, low-hanging fruits for the governors. Because the conversation we are having are for the mid to long term. This issue we are having with regards to power, you heard the Minister of Power speaking day before yesterday about how many $1 billion they need in how many years. For me, that is a defeatist position ab initio. There is no end in sight. But the governors will support the federal government if they go back, to their individual states and try to harness whatever options they have, whether it is solar, whether it is gas, whether it is coal, to see how they can get the quick wins in the short to mid term. Again, the regional blocks that are forming, whether it is the Northeastern Forum, Northwestern Forum, or the South-South, to see how they can collaborate and synergize, to support themselves while we are still speaking to the big picture conversation at the national level. That is the way to go. So I will have expected part of the sound bites of the outcome of these conversations to also include, the state governors saying they are in the next 6 months or 1 year going to be able to generate power, X megawatts for their states, like we have seen in the case of Abia. Those are the kind of conversations we would like them to add, going forward.
But these are governors who have constantly complained of lack of adequate resources. And of course, some of these states as well are lagging behind when it comes to paying salaries and pensions to pensioners. How do you expect some of these states to domesticate that law, the electricity law, so that they can have constant power and help the federal government in generating and also distributing power?
You see, Theophilus, to whom much is given, much is expected. Governors are expected to, drive the 3 critical tenets of leadership at subnational as governors, just like presidents: value creation and value innovation. If governors cannot be able to do that, and we are hearing governors whining about, lack of resources, the numbers before you took the mandate. Indeed, during campaigns, we hear governors reeling out statistics and indices and speaking loftily of how they are going to turn their states into El Dorados with milk and honey flowing everywhere. So when you contextualize it to your question, the issue of scarce resources is not supposed to be an issue of conversation. We are supposed to hear people being creative and innovative with whatever resources they have, the ones that are available, and to constructively disrupt this story of we don't have, to create and to innovate. Every state in Nigeria has no business being poor, Kemi and Theophilus. No state in Nigeria has any business being poor. So we expect governors to go back and strategize, value innovation, value creation. The resources are there, the wealth are untapped. Every square meter you walk on or you drive on in Nigeria is humongous wealth that God has blessed us with, whether it is marine or ground swell or even in the air. So they have a lot of resources. It is left to those governors to start harnessing those resources going forward, because we are already counting down. Very soon, in the next couple of days, we are counting 1 year into office. We expect governors to be more pragmatic going forward.
Right. And talking about being pragmatic, what other areas, would you suggest? Some have, lauded the federal government's move in unbundling, these discos, for example, government saying they are too big for efficiency, and now it has decided to put them along state lines. But then how do you see this working? Will you also be soliciting for more privatization, even though what we've already had, what we've already experienced was fraught with many challenges from the onset? But moving forward, now that states are expected to be more involved, how do you think this privatization bid, if that's what the governors are looking at anyway, how do you think it will work better this time around?
I will answer from 2 perspectives. First, federal to state. At federal level, the best step forward is for government to constructively disrupt this current hopeless situation with power, whether it is transmission or distribution, in fact, indeed, including generation, because we need to go back to see how we can harness our natural gas, to be more productive in that regard. And for that to happen, Kemi and Theophilus, the initial, like you said, we don't want to overflog a dead horse, but it's good to have a mirror, a rear view mirror conversation, so that we can have a clearer view windshield going forward. The process that brought in the current players was wrong. And unless you deal with that, you will have discos that are basically portfolio holders lamenting and talking because they don't have capacity. Period. These discos, as you can see, some of them are already owned by banks. They have been taken over by the banks. How do we end up having discos that have said they have capacity in terms of competence, technical competence, and financial muscle, that have now ended up being taken over by some banks in Nigeria? We know that some of these electricity distribution companies around Nigeria are already being run by some executive of banks that have been seconded to those distribution companies to run a distribution company. Come on, we need to be serious. The only way to do it is to take a step forward. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we need to critically appraise and come with prudential guidelines so that those that are not able to measure up, Mr. President should take them out in line with due process and bring people that can play. That is the only way to move forward at the federal level. At the state level, it's level playing field. The Act has given them the opportunity. They can also learn from the mistakes that have been done in the past at the federal level. State governors should realize that they should be more sure-footed with their processes, the selection process, the evaluation process, and the legal framework that will bring in the players will be such that it should protect the people. And people that are not able to deliver, there are safeguards for them to be offloaded and the right people to be brought into play, and to ensure that the infrastructure are not flogged out by people that I call cannibalizers of our infrastructure, that come under the pretense of coming to build infrastructure, but at the end of the day, they flog them and cannibalize them. And that is the important thing for the state government. They have the opportunity to do it right. They can also go modular. They don't have to go audacious. They can start with the IPP approach and start developing, modular, power production capacities in various senatorial zones, for example, and take it off from there while they are looking at the bigger picture. And like I said again, there are states that are contagious, close to each other, that can collaborate and build more capacity in terms of resources and build a power plant that can serve the two states for the betterment of those, various states because of the scarce resources. But the process is critical in terms of selection. The legal framework is execution. The execution quotient from a project management perspective, they have 3 years. We don't want to have projects that will, go into the fourth year, and then in the spirit of continuity, the next governor, whether he's the one that gets second term or another person, will truncate that process, which is a wastage again, which will take the states backward. So federal level, this is it. Review the process, take out people that don't have capacity. State level, get your acts together from the get-go. In the next 2 years, you will be smiling because you start generating wealth, because your production economy as subnational will be active.
Okay, so looking at all you have said, we've been talking about government intervention and all. How can the private sector contribute to resolving this crisis that we're faced with?
Well, the private sector will only contribute if government enables properly. We always talk about government providing the enabling environment. So we have a scenario or an instance where at the federal level, like we said, the processes were wrong, the wrong people were empowered. You can only get the best of a private sector if you are dealing with the right players in the private sector. That is the first step. Provide the enabling environment for them, level playing field, like I said, do the evaluations. I call them the 4 do's. First of all, critical stakeholder engagement. Secondly, your communication strategy should be very clear with regards to what you want to achieve. Thirdly, the process should be clear, concise, and with an objective in mind, short to mid-term, in terms of, in this case, generation of power and the revenues or the economic benefits. And the fourth, the legal framework, so that at the end of the day, the private sector players that are coming are serious people that will deliver. And when they don't, without wasting time, you are able to offload them. There are safeguards for you to bring people in, because part of the problem is legal frameworks that have handcuffed states or the federal government such that you are not able to, wean yourself off, private sector players that are not able to deliver. But if governors or the presidency, federal government, deal with the right private sector players, I believe that will be more sure-footed, front-facing, and more impactful.
Right. And since the signing into law, basically, of the Electricity Act that comes with a lot of promising and innovations to transmission, generation, and distribution of power, there's been so much more going on, especially now that the dust is yet to settle following the increment of the electricity tariff. And like we asked our guest earlier, the government is still under immense pressure to cancel this band categorization. What are your thoughts really on this and the way forward?
Thank you for that question, because I've spoken variously about this and also written about it since the increment happened. I think, with all due respect, to the players, whether it is on the government side or private side, I think they put the cart before the horse. You want to increase you want to increase tariff for service provided while the service is not yet up to par. And then you are categorizing. I tell you what you know, Kemi. When you categorize, what it means is that you are taking what you should have supplied band E or C and you give band A. So there's no efficiency. There's no optimization. You are trying to now, stratify class. So people that are in band E or C or D, for example, by default, as an instance, are where the informal sector players are. The hairdressing salons, the barbing salons, and people that are driving the critical, economy. 80% of our economy is driven by informal sector. So you go to band A, targeting most likely the big industries, but you don't have capacity to give the big industries, and maybe some what you call blue collar, or white collar residential areas. There's no strategy to that. And when you do the numbers, when you look at the kind of money, the billions that the distribution companies are trying to rein in from this, I don't know about you, but I am in a band A category location, and I don't get the number of hours they have already told me they are giving me. So because the power is not there, the power grid has already failed thrice or four times this year between January and April. So I thought the focus should be to build that capacity and to source for funding. How do you get funding? If you have the right players, they will have the right muzzle. You have players, like I said, that are already under receivership. Bank managers are already driving these environments because they don't have the capacity. Unless you deal with that, this issue of funding, which is a subset of why they said they increase this, because they say they are increasing it because they are looking for funding. You can only go back and deal with the fundamentals and the pillars. If the foundation is faulty, nothing will stand and it will not be sustainable, because indeed all band A's are complaining. And for the industries that are in band A, they have already increased their cost of production. So they have added to inflation, because when you increase my cost of production, I will definitely pass the cost to who? Consumers. You and I, Kemi and Theophilus, and other Nigerians and other residents in this country. So the sequencing of events, I think, is wrong. And I'm thinking most likely this will become a thorn in the flesh for a very long time. The service is not available, and yet you are charging exorbitantly. You give me 5 hours instead of the hours you told you give me at a higher price. It's not efficient, and it's actually not hitting the bottom line of those businesses. I think they need to think more about this.
Okay, so in thinking more about this, what do you think that they need to do, and what do you think they need to implement to give us more service for the payments?
For them to give you service, Theophilus, like I said, they need to have the capacity, and you cannot give what you don't have. For them to have the capacity to do what? To have the infrastructure functional. And if you are indebted or you are struggling to get funding and you are not credit worthy, then government should look at these players and say, who are the guys that should remain in the business? Because it's not about them anymore, Theophilus. They are struggling. It's about government coming to intervene. We saw what happened when Professor Charles Soludo did the bank recapitalization in 2005. We saw what His Highness, Khalifa Sanusi did when he came as a CBN governor to do the second phase. And we saw how the banking sector have been improving. Now we are having another round of capitalization. You need to deal with capacity. You need to deal with the integrity of the industry. You need to deal with sustainability. This is what happened with the banking. These critical players, I call them the constructive disruptors, Professor Charles Soludo and His Highness Khalifa Sanusi. That needs to happen in the power industry. Unless that is done, they will continue to be charging us higher for less. And the point is, they are actually not making any more. because you have 10,000 megawatts and you are saying you want to give capacity to people that are demanding 1,000 megawatts. You are not in business. You are wasting your resources, wasting time, and for government, with all due respect, the Honorable Minister of Power, we should move. I align with you totally. I will support you in any way we can. And my free advice is move from managing optics to managing expectations. It is when you do that that you will be practical, pragmatic, and result-oriented.
And with, states now getting involved, speaking out more through the enablement of the Electricity Act, let's also look at the metering deficits that we have. As of December, I believe last year, there's said to be at least a 7 million, deficit, 7 million mark, where this much number of Nigerians are basically unmetered. How do you think this will be corrected in the, the regime or dispensation that we all hope, things will get better and we will get, the actual power reforms needed in the country?
I think metering is a function of the same players, being able to meter the unmetered populace, and that will help block leakages and ensure that, the discos now, in fairness to them, they are able to rein in their revenue. So it is their job and to work with government to ensure that these meterings are done. But indeed, again, even those people that are not unmetered, are they actually getting the power? What are the matrices you are using to measure performance? I'm sorry, Kemi, but I'm a student of what is called promise-based leadership. And performance is not measured by events or optics. Performance is measured by impacts and results. You must have heard me say that many times, because that is what I have seen work any other place in this, anywhere else in the world. So metering can continue, but it has to go pari passu with going back to redo the foundations and setting up the pillars for the availability of power. And also while we are at it, to still look at this, going back to the gas conversation and going back to tapping the regional capabilities, that we started exploring during the President Olusegun Obasanjo regime, but it was abandoned. Looking at where do we have more sun in the north, how do you harness it for solar and wind, coal for places like Enugu and other places, and then gas for the south, and how we can see how they can, transmit to other locations. Spread your options. The infrastructure currently for the hydro are dilapidated. These are infrastructures that are almost 60, 70 years old. There's a limit to which you can flog, and in technology we call them end of life. You retire, even we will die someday. You have to retire those equipments and bring in new ones. What do you need to bring in the new ones? Capacity, financial muscle. So while that is going on, I agree with you, because you need to also block the leakages, but then it will still come back to the issue of capacity. Because when you meter them, yes, you will not be able to charge them offline, but then what you are charging for, after all, most of the emitters are even belonging to category E, D, and C.
Okay, so in everything now, and you also mentioned capacity, do you think that private sector players should be welcome, just like what we had with the telecoms, where we had a national carrier and suddenly we had private investors coming in and now the sector is booming? Do you think that should be the way?
Fantastic, Theophilus. Going back to the scenario of the bank recapitalization, now you have brought another very good example, maybe even better than the bank recapitalization. Thank you for that. Because you see how the telco industry was disrupted constructively. That's what I call constructive disruption. That is exactly what we should do. So the players is not the issue, but the right players. That process was done correctly. If you go back to my 4 do's, those were adopted in that cases. And that is why we have the MTNs of today, the Glows and the other ones. And even for those that had issues, you can see how they easily, seamlessly, transmute into new ownerships. And they still remain going concerns that are delivering service. And after all, if they don't, the ones that are providing will take the chunk of the market. That should be the focus for power. All these body movements, or what I call running on the treadmill, will not, in reality, give us that value. And the truth is, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has an audacious vision for this country. $1 trillion economy in the next 4 years? And we are running and picking our noses on the case of power. You can't run, you can't be in a race and you are picking your nose. You have to do one. Because otherwise you injure yourself or you trip and fall. Either way, you lose the game. So there is no time. We need to deal with this. We need to front face this, eyeball them. And the political will in this case of Mr. President will determine how we will proceed in terms of generation, distribution, and transmission and distribution, adding value to the economy, turning around the economy. Otherwise, we'll still come here again in 6 months, maybe worse than what it is today. I don't pray for that. Indeed, we hope that the right things will be done. Political will, very critical.
Right, very, very critical. On a final note, though, let's also have you, speaking about, the issue of energy theft, also vandalism. Some have even spoken about whether there is, deliberate sabotage, government entities owing humongous amounts, to the government or to, that could have helped in reforming the power sector. What are your thoughts on all this? It does seem like a vicious cycle, indeed.
I like the way you dovetail into this question. I said political will, and you hit the nail on the head, Kemi. Political will. If Mr. President today says that all MDAs must pay their outstanding bills, the Nigerian army, nobody wants to go and cut the power of the Nigerian army, and Mr. President says, hey, everybody should pay. Within 1 week, those deficits will be taken care of. And in fairness to the industry, that is the way it should be. If government starts paying for services it enjoys, it will cascade. Now, that political will has to come from the number one citizen of this country. And then the critical driver of that ministry should be the one that will drive it. Mr. President has his hands full. So the Minister of Power should be the one to come up with a method to say, Mr. President, this is how we rein in this, particular outstanding. But now talking about sabotage or, people that are vandalizing, there are two different things. When there is consistent failure, I dare say, we blame it on sabotage. Just like in Africa, we always blame our problem on witchcraft and people from the village. I don't want us to go there. Well, let's do the right things first, and then, because when we do that, the saboteurs will precipitate. I see marginally when we see the vandals, are being arrested here and there for taking, high tension wires and all that. But let's deal with the foundation, and these smaller issues will precipitate and they will be dealt with accordingly. That's my take on that.
All right, Group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, GITC, Baba Yusuf. Thank you very much for always. Thanks a lot for your contributions on TVC Breakfast.
My pleasure anytime, Kemi and Theophilus. Thank you so much.
And that's